to episode number 2 of Empire State Hoops. This is Adam Rothschild, joined alongside Matthew Vargo. We have a lot more to discuss with training camp underway, and the Knicks are on their way to South Carolina to start that training camp. So, Matt, welcome back to episode number 2. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Took a nap prior to this, so I feel relatively refreshed, all things considered.
That's always good to start, but we have a lot of news to get to today. We had some breaking news last week outside of the Knicks throughout the league. The Damian Lillard trade, obviously, leaving Portland sends him to the Milwaukee Bucks. That was a 3-team trade between the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks and the Portland Trailblazers. And most importantly, Drew Holiday, who was traded in that deal to Portland, was waived by Portland and traded to the Boston Celtics for Malcolm Brogdon and Robert Williams. So with the Bucks and the Celtics, now their chances to reach the NBA Finals have increased by a lot with these trades that have just happened. So how does this affect the Knicks, and how do they move forward after these trades happen?
Well, in my opinion, it now means that the Milwaukee Bucks and the Celtics, in their minds, they're thinking if each of those teams is not in the conference finals by the end of this year, then both of these teams failed with their expectations this season, because there's them, then there's the Heat, the Knicks, the Cavs, the 76ers. And then after that, it's kind of like the play-in teams like the Hawks, maybe the Hornets, the Magic. But for the Knicks, I still feel like, obviously, in the short term, it definitely hurts their chances of winning the East, but I don't think this year they're gunning for a championship. I think they're waiting until next year and beyond, where some more player movement could happen, and then they'll finally push their chips in the middle to challenge those two behemoths.
Yeah, that's been the goal for the Knicks for the past several seasons. It's just like what we talked about last episode about the KD Kyrie situation when the Knicks didn't get either player and they went to Brooklyn. It's the same situation here. The Knicks are doing a better job this time, just waiting for that player to come. And that's been a huge thing to think about. And another topic that we had to bring up, Mitchell Robinson's trainer went out on social media. We saw his Instagram story, and he was telling Tom Thibodeau, give the man more minutes. He's put in the work. He's improved his free throw shooting, which is something that we've been thinking about for a long time now, especially with Mitchell Robinson being in New York now for 6 seasons. What should his expectations be? And the fact that his trainer is trying to motivate the coach to play him more.
Well, I've got his stats pulled up. 7.5 points per game, 9.5 rebounds, 48 free throw percentage. That's Andre Drummond-esque right there. So if I am Tibbs, after Robinson's trainer basically called him out on social media, my response would just be, okay, prove it. Early in the season, I mean, most teams in the beginning portion of the season don't necessarily take it super seriously. So I feel like Tibbs would probably use this time to just be like, okay, show me. If you don't show me, then obviously your playing time is limited. Because as the season goes on, patience with him would more than likely run thin. So obviously, I guess I don't know if he asked his trainer to do this or not, but now obviously the pressure is on. It's like, you got to prove it now. If you've been in the lab working on your game, then show us.
Yeah, and that opening night, he's going to have to go against Kristaps Porzingis, a former Knick, of course, who got traded to Dallas back in 2019 after that tough injury in the 2018 season.
Pingus.
And that's going to be a tough matchup for Robinson. Porzingis is still a good player. It's not like he came out of here leaving the Knicks as a bust with injury-prone, but he still has potential, obviously, because he's still in the midst of his prime.
Well, yeah, the thing is with Porzingis is that obviously the ACL injury just sapped him of some of his athleticism. And obviously with Dallas, he and Luka, it just wasn't an ideal fit. Luka needs the ball. Porzingis wanted the ball and not just be a stretch four. He played pretty well in Washington last year, given the circumstances. I believe it was 22-9, something in that range. But obviously, he still has injury issues. But he'll obviously be healthy for opening night, and just go out there and dominate, because how tall Porzingis is, like 7'3".
7'3", yep, 7'3".
but he's not like overly like physically imposing because he's kind of like Chet Holmgren, where he's kind of built like a straw almost. So I feel like you should be able to just bully him around, because that's the key. Just try to bully him around, make him uncomfortable. So go out there and do it.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be able to prove it, because we saw what he did opening night against Boston 2 seasons ago, when that was the year the Knicks got Kemba Walker.
Oh my gosh, I remember that.
Yeah, that was 2021, and yeah, the Knicks were hoping to build off of that playoff series last year.
Didn't
the
happen.
Previous year before, of course, it didn't happen. And Christmas Day is something the Knicks should be looking forward to now, because you're not just playing against Giannis now. You're playing against Damian Lillard. You're playing against Dame Time. And we've heard stories. I just saw this thing the other day on social media about calling Dame and Giannis freak time.
Freak time?
Yeah. So I don't think the Knicks, they shouldn't be scared of Milwaukee. They should know that they're playing them on their home floor on Christmas Day. The stars are going to be everywhere, just like Taylor Swift was at MetLife Stadium a couple nights ago for the Jets.
Oh my goodness.
It's the same issue here at the Garden. The Knicks have to dial in and know that they're playing a tough team.
Side note for all you New York Jets fans who might be listening to this, just become a Swiftie. Maybe your team will actually do better. Maybe the officials will show you a little bit of love. But anyway, now that obviously when Dame got traded to Milwaukee, that just threw everybody for a loop. Everyone thought, like, he's going to Miami. And I think the Blazers did that kind of like to spite Dame almost. Like, okay, we're not going to send you where you want to go. We're going to send you to a place that gives us the best return. And on the Blazers side, they got like a very good haul in return. But for the Knicks, you shouldn't fear Milwaukee. You should respect them, obviously, because you got 2 top 10 players on the same team. But again, it's like I said in the last episode, it's still now it's an even greater opportunity to show how good you can be, because Milwaukee is clearly better now than what they were last week when we recorded episode 1. So if anything, it's a greater opportunity to make a statement. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and I think it's about time that the Knicks make a statement, and that's the great time to make a statement, because you're only going to have, like we said, they only have about 25 national TV games. That's where you make your statement against these tough teams.
And now I feel, how many cracks do they get at Milwaukee? I think they get 3 during the regular season. It could be 4, like the way the NBA schedule.
So they have the back-to-back in December.
I did know about that.
And then they play them on the road somewhere early in the season, and then later in the year, I think. So they'll play each Eastern Conference team about 3 to 4 times usually.
If you split them, go 2 for 2, you're happy with that, because it shows that you can compete with them on a level playing field. Now, in a 7-game series, hypothetically, if they were to get there, I would have my doubts, but you wouldn't feel like hopeless going into a series if you are able to handle them in the regular season.
Yeah, that's just when it comes to the playoffs, it's going to be a lot more pressure and stuff like that. If we get like a Knicks-Bucks first-round series, but obviously I would not see the Knicks winning that in total. So another topic that we need to get to, Magic Johnson. There's something that came up with him a couple days ago. He was the president of the Lakers a couple years back. He stepped down the first year after LeBron's season, 2019. And the Lakers, of course, went on to win a championship the next season. Now, we hear Magic Johnson, he said this, that if he were to come back and run a team, he said the Knicks would be one of them. Because we heard James Dolan a couple days ago, he said something, I don't like owning teams. Well, you own a lot of teams in New York. And Magic Johnson is a guy who can own a team, but I don't think he can own multiple.
Well, Magic Johnson, as a businessman, he himself cannot buy a team. That's why he teamed up with Josh Harris, who owns the 76ers and I believe the New Jersey Devils in the NHL, to try to buy the Washington Commanders. And they did. It was successful. He has a minority stake in the team, I would imagine. But for the Knicks, I would feel much more comfortable having Magic as a minority owner rather than an actual component in the basketball operations, because was he really that good with the Lakers at building a team? I personally thought because it's hard to say because a lot of the pieces he brought in when he was with the Lakers, they got rid of them all after he left in the Anthony Davis trade. I believe he was there when they drafted Lonzo. And I think with Brandon Ingram, but the other guys like Julius Randle, who was on the Lakers at the time, and D'Lo, I don't think he was around for that. So overall, I feel like Magic's a great guy to have as like a name brand in the ownership box rather than as a main component of the basketball operations.
Yeah, he's obviously a big name in this league and was when he was playing in the 80s with the Lakers, winning 5 championships. But now as an owner, you think about this a lot different. Like the Knicks have had bad owners and head coaches. Like Isaiah Thomas was a head coach at one time for the Knicks, which was not a great time to be alive, but
I don't believe. Okay, Isaiah Thomas, for what it's worth, was he a bad coach? Yes, he was, like by far. And was he a good GM? No, not in the slightest. Was he a good GM? But I believe he did have a few draft picks every here and there that were actually good. I think he drafted David Lee, and I mean, he tried to get LeBron for what it's worth. I mean, I guess a blind squirrel can find a nut every once in a while, but
yeah, I know with Toronto, when he was with the Raptors, he was a part of the draft when they got, I believe, Damon Stoudemire, he was a short point guard.
I remember Damon Stoudemire. He was on the Blazers for some of those Blazers teams.
Yeah, Damon Stoudemire was also a good player under Isaiah Thomas. Mm-hmm. And another thing we have to get to, that loaded Eastern Conference. It's loaded, loaded, loaded. When you think about the Eastern Conference where the Knicks are standing, they have Boston in front of them. They have Philadelphia. They got Milwaukee. But obviously I see you shaking your head there because there's question marks around a lot of these teams. Like you just mentioned before we started, that James Harden is slowly making his way into training camp. Like today, he showed up a day late apparently.
Yep. I feel like with the Knicks, as I alluded to, Milwaukee and Boston are their own tier. That's undeniable, at least on paper. But they're clearly in the tier 2 of teams, and while the big question with the Knicks is what is their upside, I feel like you would agree with me on that. But the other teams, like the Sixers, are the Sixers just a ticking time bomb at this point? Like, James Harden's unhappy. We saw the last twice what's happened in the past when he's unhappy with the Nets and the Rockets. So what's going to make us think it's going to be any different? And Embiid could be out the door and by the end of this season. I don't know. That's my theory. And other teams like the Heat, it's like, again, were they just a flash in the pan, like a once in a generation run? The Raptors and the Nets So I don't really see the East as particularly loaded out. I see it more so as top-heavy with a bunch of good, not great teams after them, and the Knicks are one of them. I see more so as the West as the juggernaut conference. We're going back to the good old days in the early 2000s where the West was the dominant conference because you got the Nuggets, you got the Lakers, the Clippers, the Suns now. I think the Suns can be really good with some of the acquisitions they've made. Overall, I see for the Knicks overall 2 roadblocks in their journey to try to get to the NBA Finals. It's just Milwaukee, Boston.
Yeah, I could see them topping Philadelphia this year because you never know what could happen because they lost a lot of key players. They lost Shake Milton to the Minnesota Timberwolves.
That was a tough one.
Yeah, that was a tough loss, definitely. But it's just so many question marks around Philly, their new head coach, Nick Nurse.
And the brewing tensions of the 2 superstars.
Yeah, because you know how teams work when they have 2 superstars. There's always question marks. There's always question marks. And with the Knicks, I don't see a single question mark around Jalen Brunson right now. Nothing around Julius Randle. Tom Thibodeau's got all his players into training camp fully healthy, which is what he reported yesterday.
Well, I feel like there's only one question for me about Jalen Brunson, and was he also just a guy who had one very good season and then kind of just regresses back to the mean? I don't think he is. And I mean, I guess, and you did allude to it, that the Knicks, they have chemistry, which is something that now Milwaukee's going to have to try to learn on the fly now that Drew Holiday's gone and they brought in Dame. Although I do think they'll find it quickly because I feel like Giannis is an easy guy to play with, and he and Dame do completely different things, so it'll gel perfectly. The Celtics is a little bit different because Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, And obviously, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, they're both kind of the same player, although Tatum is much more talented than Jaylen Brown. They're both score first, defensive stoppers on the other end. They don't particularly pass the ball well. They don't particularly rebound well. So the Knicks do, one up those teams in chemistry. I'll give them that.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I love about the Knicks is that they can match up so well with these teams. Like we saw last season how the Knicks, they won 3 games against Boston last year, and they did it as a team. They didn't focus on just Jalen Brunson or Josh Hart or Julius Randle. It was the whole team that just bought in, and they just beat Boston 3 times last year. 2 of them were tough. They had the game in January where they went into Boston and they won in overtime. Brunson got the winning block over Brogdon. They had the game. They had the game in February where Jason Tatum got ejected in the 3rd quarter.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
And then they had the game where Brunson wasn't even playing in this game in March on this long road trip the Knicks had, and they were going back home to play Charlotte after that, and quickly dropped 39 points off the bench.
I was just about to say, I remember one of them was a quickly game where I believe he started in place of Brunson and just obviously lit him up. And that was when I knew that last year that Celtics were not coming out of the East, because you got to beat those teams in the regular season. Like last year, and you would agree with this, the Celtics on paper were clearly better than the Knicks. And you said they lost to them 3 times. And I was eventually proven right, just not the team that I thought would beat them would be proven right. Like, thank you, Miami, for doing it. The last thing I want to see is the Celtics in the finals. But overall, yeah, I don't really know how to conclude that. Just kind of a little statement I thought I'd add right there.
Yeah, the Knicks and the Celtics have been rivals for years now, especially going back to the Paul Pierce, Carmelo Anthony days, and even before that, a long time ago.
They've never really matched up in the postseason very often, unless we're going back to like the 1970s or something. But in recent times, I don't really... When was the last playoff series that they played against one another?
2013. Knicks 1-6.
It might have been 20... Oh, yeah, that's right. I was about to say 2011 when Melo first got to the Knicks, but I forgot. They played... Yeah, you're right. I believe that was like the end of the Big 3 era in Boston. They traded them to Brooklyn not too long after that.
Yeah, because 2011, when they got Melo, the Knicks got swept in that series by Boston because the Celtics were just too good.
Oh, yeah. That was the year, I think, Allen, Rondo, Pierce, and Garnett were all All-Stars, so...
Yeah, and that was also the year they had Shaquille O'Neal on the Celtics.
I forgot Shaq was on the Celtics that final year. Shaq, I love you. You were mega washed by that point. I think you retired after that season.
Yeah, Shaq was done by that. He went on TNT the next year, and he's still doing it today.
Oh, I love Shaq and Chuck on TNT. It's the greatest watch ever.
It's literally the NBA comedy show of today.
It is.
Yeah. And our next discussion we have to talk about is the in-season tournaments. The in-season tournament is a new thing starting in the NBA this season. And how do you think this is going to affect not just the Knicks, but all the other teams? Because this is going to be happening in November, December. While regular season games are going on, this is going to be happening on separate days. And teams are divided into certain groups. The Knicks are in a group, I believe, with the Bucks, the Heat, the Hornets, and the Wizards, I believe.
Yeah, you got it. Got it right on the money. Now, I see the in-season tournament. Now, I'm going to keep it real. I'm a skeptic of the tournament. I kind of see it as a desperate attempt for the NBA to try to make their superstars care about the regular season. And it is a problem that for the past couple of years, teams have just been punting on the regular season, all this load management. I mean, they literally made a policy that you have to play under certain restrictions. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but who knows? I was a skeptic of the play-in tournament, and now, honestly, I love the play-in tournament. I love the single elimination knockout style, so I'm a skeptic, but I'm more than willing to be proven wrong on this.
Yeah, because I think, like we heard, I know you just mentioned load management, which is something I definitely wanted to hear about in this episode, because I heard Kawhi Leonard was in the media yesterday, and he was like, I don't know what that is. Like you should know that by now. It's like the Clippers are a great example to bring up because they had Kawhi Leonard and Paul George missing so many games last year, and they still somehow made the playoffs. And it just comes to show that, some players just don't care.
Well, I feel like there are certain outliers where players need load management. And I think Kawhi Leonard is actually a player who desperately needs load management because Kawhi, he's never had a super serious injury up until his ACL. I mean, he had that Zaza Pacheep shot ankle injury in his last full season with the Spurs. But you saw it, like, even despite the load management, Kawhi in that Suns series, I believe he was great in game 1. I believe he got hurt in game 2 and then just never came back the rest of the series. You could argue they could have won that series had he played the whole way, but I think Kawhi is a player who actually needs load management. Some of the other guys, like, I don't know, Paul George and Ja Morant, Kevin Durant, I don't necessarily think they need load management. That's why I'm kind of intrigued to see where this in-season tournament goes and the new load management policies.
Yeah, I don't think this load management is gonna affect the Knicks that much because their players play most of the season. We had only Brunson and Barrett, and Randall didn't miss a lot of games. I know Barrett had that injury against the Mavericks back in the end of December where he got hurt. It was his wrist, I believe, and he missed a few games, but he got back pretty quick. So there's no reason for the Knicks to worry about load management, obviously. But the play-in tournament, like we said, might benefit them. It might not. We'll see what happens with that. Anyways, Mark Jackson, who was let go of ESPN along with Jeff Van Gundy. They both were with Mike Breen on the NBA on ESPN. They all did the NBA Finals together. That is no longer the case on ESPN.
Yep.
However, Mark Jackson is going to have a reunion with Mike Breen, taking over Clyde Frazier on certain days on MSG Networks. And that is going to be great because Mark Jackson, as we know, he's a former New York Knick. He was a point guard for the Knicks.
He was, yeah.
Also played for the Indiana Pacers with Reggie Miller. And what do you think he's going to have to bring to the table? Because obviously we talk about players, but as a broadcaster, Mark Jackson has a lot of knowledge on the Knicks, and I'm sure he's going to know this team very well pretty soon.
That's why I think it's a good fit. I mean, I know for a lot of the layoffs at ESPN, it was a business decision, plain and simple. And now, I believe to replace him and Jeff Van Gundy, they're now rolling Mike Breen, Doc Rivers, and Doris Burke, I believe, right?
Yeah, yep, that's right.
I think that Mark Jackson... I personally like Mark Jackson as a broadcaster. I think he's smart. He knows the game. As a coach, I kind of thought he was whatever, because the Warriors immediately became the Warriors once he left. Now he laid the foundation, but that's a separate topic for another day. I think it's good. Obviously, former Knick, Mike Breen, legend. Also, Clyde Frazier, legend. So overall, I'd say it's a good thing. You have a guy who knows the game. He was a former Knick. It should be a good fit.
Yeah, I think it's also going to be different because, like, in the past when Clyde hasn't been on, we've heard Kenny Albert, we've heard Wally Szczerbiak on there.
Wally Szczerbiak did it? I knew Kenny Albert did, but I completely was thrown for a loop by that. Wally Szczerbiak of all players.
Yeah, because he's been on like the talk shows on MSG, but he's also, I believe he's done a few games with Mike Breen. He's done games with Kenny Albert as the color commentator, and that just goes to show that the Knicks have so many great broadcasters on their team, and of course Mike Breen being a broadcaster Hall of Famer.
All right, Wally Szczerbiak, former Minnesota Timberwolf. Okay, you learn something new every day.
Yeah, you see those things every day.
Yep.
Next up, Quentin Grimes. Tom Thibodeau said that he will be the starting shooting guard this season to start the year, of course, in that opener against Boston. Quentin Grimes has proved a lot in his sophomore season, and his shooting improved. Everything for his game improved. I'm sure the stats can tell. And
I got him up right now.
And we've seen on the floor how Quentin Grimes has improved. I watched the video that the Knicks put up recently about him and his journey from Houston, and how he played at the collegiate level, and he played really well in Houston. And what he's brought to New York has been amazing, to say the least. And the fact that he deserves this shooting guard spot is 100% true.
I believe it was warranted. Correct me if I'm wrong. Last year, I believe Grimes was starting for them by the end of the season, but I think last year, going into it, I believe, was Fournier still the starting shooting guard?
Fournier was still the starting shooting guard, and Tom Thibodeau didn't put the 9-man rotation until like December, so that's when Fournier got taken out, and he put Grimes in at the 2.
And that was, correct me if I'm wrong, that was right around the time that they like firmly established themselves in the thick of the playoff race, correct me if I'm wrong about that. But I think that obviously, I mean, it just made sense. Evan Fournier looks like a guy whose best days are long behind him, but Grimes, he went from, I believe, he went from 6 points a game to 11.3, so he almost doubled it in only 29 minutes per game. So he was like a starter playing bench minutes, if that makes sense. And since Tibbs definitely loves to play his starters, you know that more than anyone, it's not crazy for me to expect somewhere between 14, 15 points per game in around 36-ish minutes. I don't know, that's kind of where I stand on it.
Yeah, and I think Quentin Grimes is coming into his third season. He's going to try to win a lot of awards this year. Maybe get like all defensive or something like that, because he's also a good defender. Like we saw him hobbling on his ankle in the playoffs last year in Game 5 at the Garden and stripping the ball from Jimmy Butler, and that's what he's about. He's kind of like a Josh Hart type of player, and just goes for everything. So that's been fun to watch with Quentin Grimes.
I also think, was he the primary defender on Donovan Mitchell in that Cavs series? I believe he was, but they mixed it around a lot as well.
Yeah, I believe they mixed between Grimes, Josh Hart, RJ Barrett a little bit too. And that's the good thing about the Knicks. They have so many players that can defend star players. It's better than just having one guy on that player the whole time, because that guy's going to get tired.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, and it showed, like Donovan Mitchell outside of Game 2 had a bad series. And I think what also helped is that Donovan Mitchell is not he's not built kind of like a Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown or not even Giannis for that matter. So it's a lot easier to game plan against guys like that, because also Donovan Mitchell is a bad perimeter defender. So if you can make him work on the offensive end, he's not going to be able to punish you on the other end with lockdown defense. So that is a plus for them to have. I would just like to see them against the upper echelon of wing players in the East, see how they would hold down the fort, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and that's going to show with the Knicks defense this season. And our last piece of discussion we have to talk about, this just got leaked recently.
Yep.
These are the new City Edition jerseys for the Knicks this season. So many people have talked about bringing back the jerseys from the 90s or the early 2010s when the Knicks in 2012 had those nice jerseys. And how do you feel about this? Because I'm not gonna lie, they look pretty good.
I think they look fine as is. It kind of looks like, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of the jerseys they used to wear in like the mid 2000s. Correct me if I'm wrong, with the black that they would wear sometimes. I might just be completely wrong about this, and you can flame me in the comments if whoever is watching this. But I do think it looks fine. Maybe it'll grow on me over time, but I don't know, compared to like other certain city jerseys, these are kind of just in the middle of the pack for me. The Denver Nuggets, I'll always be a big fan of, kind of like the rainbow black jerseys. They still are using those, right? I believe.
I think a few seasons ago they had used them. Like it's the one with the mountain, right? Like
yes.
Yep.
Love those, like super good ones. But I don't know. I gotta compare them to the rest of the NBA city jerseys. So let me like look at that for the time being. If you can add something in while I'm doing so.
Yeah, because the Knicks have had a lot of interesting jerseys over the years. Like you've seen, like back in the 70s and 80s, they had like the Yankee logo on the shorts, and it's been pretty basic over the years. Like there's a lot of different stuff that they've had. So,
all right, okay, they don't have all of them because they all haven't been made public yet. Wait, hold on, I don't believe this is it. But this is just a leak, right? This isn't the final thing.
This is just a leak. I don't know if it's confirmed yet, but this is the photo that I saw.
I think this article has it a lot better that I'm looking up, and they're mad about my ad blocker, so I guess I won't get a chance to get a good look at it. But overall, they're fine. You could do better. You can do a lot worse. I'm not like offended by them or anything. They get the job done, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really good. What I love about these jerseys is that they try to do a variety. Like last year, they had the black jerseys, which I really like because they matched it with the court.
Okay, yeah, those were really good.
Yeah.
Why are teams like so hesitant to just run back the like city jerseys from like previous seasons? I think like an example I have is the Jazz. Remember those Jazz City jerseys where it was like blue and then like purple, red, and it like kept on going. Like, you know what I'm talking about?
I think so. Well, I know they had the ones from the 90s. I know.
Oh yeah, those ones.
Those were really good. I know.
Oh yeah, I love those.
Yeah, those were definitely really good. And anyways, that will do it for episode number 2 of Empire State Hoops. This has been Adam Rothschild alongside Matthew Vargo, and we will see you next week in episode number 3.
Have a good one, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back.